Part 75. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 741. When people interact with each other, their first impression is often inaccurate. After getting to know each other, Su Ming discovered that Jixiang, a gangster, did not rely entirely on fighting and killing, but his main business was actually seafood. So you opened Jixiang Seafood, he Baoan found a men's jacket to wear, very surprised. Is it very famous? Su Ming asked. He Baoan nodded and said, Jixiang Seafood is very famous, fresh and authentic, and never sells frozen or dead goods. Jixiang patted his chest proudly. Of course, doing business is not about grabbing territory. Only when the goods are good will customers come. I can't put a knife on people's necks and force customers to buy seafood. If you dare, I will be the first to drag you to jail, he Baoan said. Haha, madam, don't worry. Brother Le taught me to abide by the law when he saw me last time, Jixiang said with a smile, and then said a little depressed, but madam, you should also understand our difficulties. It is very difficult to do all legitimate business in a short period of time. Investment requires money, and bank loans are difficult. Now you also know that the seafood market is very competitive, and I have to take care of my brothers. Wow, I just ate a fish from you, do you still want me to introduce you to business? He Baoan shrugged. Okay, then our team's dinner will be scheduled at your place in the future. But the police department is short of funds, and the Independent Commission Against Corruption is watching all day, so our dinner expenses are very low. He, madam is willing to take care of it, which is very face-saving, Jixiang said a bit perfunctorily. Su Ming thought a little further and asked, do you export seafood here? Of course, if there is a large-scale export, my income can be greatly increased. But foreign countries have their own fisheries, so they don't need to buy from Hong Kong, right? Jixiang said inexplicably. It's not a foreign country, it's the mainland. Su Ming smiled and said, I have a catering business in the mainland. Eating fish in Jixiang's restaurant, of course, is not just a dish of fish. Su Ming paid attention and found that the seafood in Jixiang's restaurant was indeed fresh and authentic as he Baoan said. While eating, there were several waves of people who looked like restaurants coming to buy ingredients, and there was also a delivery man. Jixiang's brothers carefully checked the seafood sent by the other party, and even scolded the other party because a few mantis shrimps died. Hearing is false, seeing is believing. What Jixiang said may not be true, but Su Ming silently observed everything and did not tamper with the ingredients because it was a store opened by a gangster. Of course, if all this was deliberately arranged by Jixiang, then the gangster's mind was too deep, and there was no need for it, because Jixiang should not know that he was running a catering business in the mainland, and deliberately came to win his favor and orders. The domestic seafood business is very hot, and ordinary people like to eat seafood, but there are two big problems. In inland cities like Yangchuan, due to geographical problems, most seafood is not so fresh. A few restaurants sell fresh seafood, but due to freight issues, the price is expensive. Even in large hotels, as far as Su Ming knows, not all seafood is alive, and it is good to have a 50-50 split. In the case of less strict supervision, merchants are of course profit-seeking. The seafood in coastal cities is guaranteed to be fresh, but the price is too expensive, and it is often overcharged. Especially in tourist cities, locals are better, but it is normal for tourists to be overcharged, but the merchants are just different in the depth of the knife. Occasionally, there is a seafood restaurant with good quality and low price, even if it is a small shop in a corner, it can become popular. So Su Ming thinks that there is a big gap in the seafood market in Yangchuan City. What is lacking is not goods or markets, but conscientious enterprises. The restaurant business is currently just Su Ming's sideline and belongs to the peripheral industry sequence. He is not in a hurry to make money from it. What he needs to do at this stage is the same as the initial stage of all other enterprises under his name: lay a good foundation. Fame and reputation are both indispensable. Hongbo and Su Ming had a special chat. In the past 5 years, high-end restaurants in China will not be popular again. Going the high-end route is a death wish unless you have a deeper purpose and do not expect to make money from it. Hongjia cuisine is the best example. With a century-old reputation, top chefs in China, and Hongbo's experience, it still cannot be preserved. The problem is not with Hongjia cuisine itself, but with the domestic environment. The great flow of history is mighty. Those who follow it will prosper, and those who go against it will perish. The reopened Hongjia cuisine does not go the high-end route, but the civilian route, targeting the urban middle class. The introduction of affordable seafood is just in time. Wow, I said Su Sheng is my benefactor. When Su Ming said that a catering company in the mainland wanted goods, Jixiang's attitude immediately changed. No matter how much the people in Hebeiaoan's police station can eat, how much money can they spend? Besides, their identities are somewhat awkward after all. Hebeiaoan may just talk about it, and he may not really bring people to eat and drink. But catering companies are different. If they want to get orders, they must be big orders. If they do well, they can feed a large number of people by supplying goods exclusively for a catering company. Being a boss like Jixiang is glorious on the surface, but the pressure behind the scenes is actually very great. Apart from other things, just a group of younger brothers who hang out with him have to rely on him for support. Sometimes they are arrogant and ruthless just to make business smoother. Su Ming left Hongbo's phone number to Jixiang and said, "For specific matters, you can talk to this person. He is responsible for the specific operation of the catering company." His face became serious and he said, "Brother Jixiang, since it is a business, everything should be done according to the rules. If there is a problem with the seafood and it is not done according to the contract, don't blame me for not giving face to Brother Li. Mr. Su, don't worry. My family has been fishermen for generations. If I smash this sign, I will be embarrassed to enter the ancestral grave in the future," Jixiang said. After dinner, Jixiang found a black doctor for Su Ming. It is very difficult to take the medical qualification exam in Hong Kong. You need a basic education, and even the test paper is in English. These two items alone have stumped many grassroots doctors. Some of these people are traditional Chinese medicine practitioners, and some are inherited from their families. How could they have attended medical school and speak English? There are also many Western doctors who have received formal training. Due to various negative reasons, mainly ethical issues, such as accepting red envelopes and having relationships with patients, they have been found by the Medical Association and the Independent Commission Against Corruption, and their medical qualifications have been revoked. These people constitute a huge team of black doctors in Hong Kong. Hong Kong's regular hospitals are strictly managed. When they receive knife and gunshot wounds, they will notify the police immediately. Therefore, Hong Kong gangsters usually do not go to hospitals when they are injured. They all look for these unlicensed black doctors. The level of black doctors varies. The best ones are no less skilled than the attending doctors in large hospitals. The poor ones can even kill people by pulling out a tooth. The injury on Su Ming's buttocks is indeed not easy to expose. It was hit by a dart, and it also involves Ho Po Man and the police pistol. It is very troublesome to investigate. It is better to have less trouble than more. I think the boss of the area, Jixiang, will not find a black doctor with unqualified skills to treat himself, so he nodded and agreed. The black doctor is called Lam Kwakwan, a very poetic name. He looks gentle and fair. It is completely impossible to tell that he is a beast in human skin whose license was revoked because he peeped at his female colleagues in the toilet. Wow, Mr. Su, the muscles on your buttocks are very dense. Have you trained your gluteal muscles? Lin Kuyun applied medicine and bandaged Su Ming skillfully, while speaking without restraint. with a frivolous smile on his face, and said to Jixiang, "Brother Jixiang, you are right to listen to me. Exercise your buttocks muscles more often. Men with strong buttocks are super powerful in bed. If you can be half as good as Mr. Su, I guarantee that you can pick up girls without spending money, and all the ladies will pay for you. Do your thing." Jixiang glared at him fiercely, but also secretly glanced at Su Ming's buttocks, and then looked at He Baoan, who was guarding outside the door, wondering if it was really because Mr. Su was too powerful in bed that this young female chief inspector ignored her status and got together with him. Subconsciously touching the flat buttocks, Jixiang thought to ask his younger brother to get a gym membership tomorrow. Just after the bandage was done, Jixiang received a call, and the man was arrested. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 742. Jixiang shook the phone in his hand at Su Ming and said proudly, "Mr. Su, the person has been caught." So fast. Not only Su Ming was surprised, but even He Baoan was shocked and re-examined the gangster in front of him. Su Ming and He Baoan had direct contact with the two rustic-looking guys. From the beginning, they obviously had the intention to lead them to this remote alley. Later, two powerful darts, and when they saw He Baoan show his gun, they turned around and left without fighting. All this shows that they are not simple. It took only a short time, a meal, plus bandaging, and no more than 3 hours in total. Jixiang, a local snake, actually caught these two people? And they were caught alive. Even the world-famous Hong Kong police dare not say that they have such high efficiency. You too, there is no one on the ground in Causeway Bay that I, Jixiang, can't find. Even if it's a mouse, I can get it out in a minute. Jixiang asked Su Ming with a very confident tone, how to deal with it? Should we plant lotus directly? He Baoan glared at him. Su Ming waved his hand, and then gave Jixiang a thumbs up. Brother Jixiang really has a way. Just bring the person here. I want to ask what the grudge is, why you want to hurt me for no reason. Momotaro and Rukawa turned and left the alley, came to the fish market street, lowered their hats and walked forward quickly, just when two young men carrying a large water tank filled with fish came out from a corner on the side, and the two sides collided with each other. This time, the skills of both sides were revealed. They were caught off guard. Momotaro and Rukawa stood firm with just a stumble, and the two young men fell on their backs. The box fell to the ground, and the water and fish were scattered all over the ground. Baga, Rukawa glared at him. He was fine, but his clothes were splashed with water. Just as he was about to get angry, Momotaro pulled him and frowned, signaling him not to say anything and to leave this troubled place quickly. When they were about to leave, the people around them were not happy, and a few ruffian young men surrounded them, holding various tools from the fish market in their hands, with unfriendly faces. After a short fight, Momotaro and Rukawa had knocked down 5 gangsters neatly and fled. "Senior, a dart just hit that guy. I can guarantee that his bones must be broken. We have also completed Princess Keiko's order. Now let's go back and report," Rukawa said after returning to the mainland. Momotaro was old and shook his head, saying, "Not now. We are covered in fishy smell. If we go back to report, it will not only be disrespectful to the princess, but also easy to be discovered. What should we do? Walk around the city for a few times, change clothes, and make sure that there are no traces left, then go back to report," Momotaro said, waving to stop a taxi, and said in a strange English accent, "Go to Temple Street Clothing City." The driver looked at the two people in the rearview mirror, nodded calmly, and started the car. Soon they arrived at the clothing market in Temple Street. The two paid the fare and got off the car. After watching them walk into a clothing store, the driver took out his phone. "Hello, boss, I'm Aja. I just picked up 2 people. It seems that they are the guys you are looking for. They are covered in fishy smell." They got off the car in Temple Street and entered the store of Big Breast Ping. Not long after, a dozen gangsters led by a middle-aged man with a big gold chain rushed into the Temple Street Ping fashion store. "Brother Huashan, why did you think of coming to me?" a middle-aged woman with a penis as big as a watermelon asked in surprise. "Ping, are there two men with fishy smell in your store?" asked Dejin Lianzi. "Yes, they bought 2 sets of the cheapest windbreakers, changed their clothes and left," Ping said. "Where did they go?" Huashan frowned. "These 2 people are what Brother Jixiang is looking for." "Brother Jixiang, the boss of Shen Causeway Bay? Wow, why didn't you tell me earlier? If you told me earlier, I would keep them as a gift to Brother Jixiang." Ping turned around and said to a young man in the store who was helping customers try on coats, "Daze, call a few people, accompany Brother Huashan, and go find the 2 losers just now." "I know, sister." The young man called Daze nodded, whistled when he went out, and 7 or 8 young people who looked like shop assistants rushed out from the surrounding clothing stores, but all of them had rebellious faces. "Brother Huashan, these are my brothers. I have seen the 2 people just now. I will take you to find them," Daze said. "Okay, I'll introduce you to Brother Jixiang after we catch him. Let's go." The team grew, and more than 20 people began to search in Temple Street. Daze and Dakshanping were considered to be the bullies in Temple Street, and they were quite famous. Many gangsters who were strolling in Temple Street saw this formation and took the initiative to come up and ask, "Wow, Daze, what happened? Do you need help?" There is strength in numbers. No matter how the 2 Japanese ninjas disguised themselves and acted low-key, they were still very conspicuous walking in the old streets of Hong Kong. They were quickly tracked in their general direction. Regent Hotel. There are many hotels in Hong Kong, and there is only one Regent Hotel, which is a 4-star standard. However, there are at least dozens of Regent Hotel. The name has a big in front, which lowers the grade by several levels. There is a dilapidated residential building with many neon signs of various sizes hanging on the walls, such as Genuine Financial Company, Happy City Hourly Shop, Shiatsu Massage. The largest sign is Lijing Hotel, please go to the 3rd floor. "Senior, this seems to be a place of entertainment, right?" Rukawa-Kaed asked in confusion. "The more such places are, the more mixed the good and bad are, and it will not attract the attention of the police. Besides, we will just rest for a few hours and then go back." The 2 went up to the 3rd floor of the Lijing Hotel, and under the guidance of an uncle who was picking his nose, they opened an hourly room. "Boss, do you want a lady? The new northern girl is guaranteed to be strong enough," the uncle asked, holding the wall with one hand and pinching his nose with the other hand. "No, thank you, we will leave after sleeping for a while." Momotaro bowed slightly. "Picking, dead gay, remember not to poop on the sheets." Seeing that there was no extra money to be made, the uncle turned around and left with a curse. Momotaro closed the door with his backhand, his eyes became sharp in an instant, and he quickly checked the room, closed the blinds, stared at the street outside through the gap for a while, and then nodded. "Senior, there's no need to be so exaggerated. I was very careful along the way, and no one followed us." Rukawa-Kaed was quite disapproving. One of the must-learn lessons for ninjas is tracking and anti-tracking. He is 100% confident that as long as someone is following them, they will definitely find out. Times have changed. Don't underestimate the Hong Kong police. It is said that there is a paparazzi with strong tracking ability in the police force. The division of labor is clear and reasonable, and they are specifically responsible for tracking suspects. Momotaro said seriously, "The woman just now is a middle-level cadre of the police. The Hong Kong police's ability to handle affairs is much stronger than that of the Japanese Metropolitan Police Department. We must not take it lightly and confuse them with the group of cabinet lackeys of the Metropolitan Police Department." "Yes, senior, I have learned a lesson." Rukawa-Kaed is arrogant, but he still attaches great importance to tradition. In the face of the senior's teachings, although he doesn't take it seriously, he still responds respectfully. Okay, let's take a short break. When it gets dark, we'll go meet up with Princess Keiko. The two of them put on their clothes and took a nap at the head of the bed with their eyes closed. Their breathing gradually became even, and they seemed to be fast asleep. About an hour later, there was a knock on the door. The two ninjas jumped up from the bed like frightened leopards. Momotaro winked, and Rukawa nodded, grabbed a small sword with his backhand, walked to the wall, and opened the door sideways. "Boss, do you want service?" Outside the door was a young woman in very revealing clothes, with heavy makeup and a strong smell of cigarettes. As she spoke, she came up to Rukawa's waist in a frivolous way, and said with a chuckle, "Wow, this boss is so handsome, he looks like Eddie Peng." Rukawa's handsome face sank slightly, and he took a step back to avoid the hug, saying in stiff Chinese, "Girl, please respect yourself. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 743. Strictly speaking, Rukawa Kaed is a very good young man, with outstanding business ability, tenacity and bravery, simple nature, and loyalty to the royal family. He has a kind of pride and integrity that is common among young geniuses. Just a little dull. The young woman looked at this handsome guy who looked like Penyuyan for a while like an idiot. Then she stretched her head and looked into the room, and pursed her lips in disdain. "Two grown men, what fun is there? Not as good as me. Call another little sister to come, or the three of us can do it, but you have to pay extra." Rukawa Kaed fought with people and killed people without blinking an eye, but at this time, he blushed slightly and was a little at a loss. Momotaro coughed, took out a few $100 Hong Kong, stuffed it into the woman, and said with a smile, "Thank you for your kindness, but we still have some money tonight. I have work and want to take some more rest." The woman took the money without hesitation, stuffed it into the gap in her collar, then straightened her chest, and asked with a smile, "Sir, do you really not want to serve?" Momotaro shook his head and smiled, indicating that there was no need. Seeing that he was resolute, the woman stopped pestering her, turned around and left, muttering, "These two damn faggots deserve to have their assholes banged for the rest of their lives, and they made me hundreds of dollars in vain. Senior, why do you give money to such a despicable woman? It's such an insult to the honor of our royal ninjas," Rukawa Kaed said angrily. "Okay, young man, this is not a training ground at Mount Fuji, nor is it a royal palace. There is no need to talk about honor." Momotaro lay on the bed again, closed his eyes slightly, and said calmly, "Don't offend these little people. Although they can't accomplish anything, they can easily do bad things. Speaking of honor, a ninja with a true sense of honor should be able to abandon all his vanity in order to carry out the orders of the monarch." When Rukawa Kaed heard the last sentence, his expression straightened. "Senior is so right, I have learned a lesson again. Okay, let's take a rest. If nothing happens in another hour, we can go back," Momotaro said calmly. As soon as the young woman came downstairs and walked around the corner of the stairs, several people sitting on the sofa at the door stood up at the same time. Daoze, Huashan brother were among them, and there were three people who looked like the leaders of Young and Dangerous. "Is anyone here?" asked a fat man with a big belly. "Brother Ma Wang, I can see clearly that they are the two people Brother Daoze mentioned," the woman said softly. "Very good." King Ma slapped the woman hard on her pert buttocks and said with a smile, "You don't have to pay the fee this month." "Brother Ma Wang, you look so good." The woman laughed so hard that her whole body trembled. Huashan looked towards the corner of the stairs, lowered his voice, and asked the others, "Brothers are all here, let's start now." "Wait a minute." Ma Wang shook his head. "I heard from Brother Jixiang that those two people have practiced Kung Fu, and they can be very hard." If they come hard, they will defend the room and resist, and the brothers may suffer great losses. What should we do? We have to do what Brother Jixiang ordered us to do, a subordinate of Jixiang said coldly. He, Jiangbao, have you forgotten my nickname? Horse King. No matter how fierce a horse is, it can be tamed and submissive in my hands. With a strange smile on his face, Ma Wang took 2 bottles of mineral water, then took out a small bottle of medicine from the freshness compartment of a small refrigerator, injected it into the mineral water bottle cap with a thin needle, shook it vigorously, and then handed it to the owner of Regent Hotel. Do you know what to do? King Ma asked. The big hotel owner, the fat man who kept picking his nose, smiled and nodded. He also has another identity, a member of Sheng. Boom, boom, boom. Not long after Momotaro and Rukawa-Kaed lay down, the door knocked again. Both of them frowned, with a strong look of vigilance flashing in their eyes. This time they did not open the door immediately. Instead, they quickly got out of bed and hid in the corner of the room. They held the darts in their hands and stared at the door warily. Dong dong dong, dong dong dong, the knocking on the door kept ringing, and there was a very impatient voice at the door, "Don't do it, open the door, there will be benefits." Hearing the voice of the boss, Momotaro turned over, jumped down from the cabinet, put one hand behind his back, and opened the door with the other. Wow, why are you so dedicated? The fat boss didn't pick his nose this time, he had no hands, he was carrying 2 bottles of mineral water with both hands. Someone from the police station just informed me that the water pipe exploded. There is no water supply in the hotel. Don't call me stingy. If you want to drink more, come to the bar and buy it for 20 yuan a bottle. After saying that, he threw the 2 bottles of water on the bed, turned around and left. These inexplicable Xiangjiang people don't know what politeness is, and they repeatedly disturb the guests' rest. Rukawa-Kaed looked bored. Do you expect the British to educate real gentlemen? The British Empire itself is composed of a group of pirates. Momotaro sneered disdainfully. After being on tenterhooks for a long time, he was really thirsty, so he opened a bottle of water and started to drink. Senior, wait a minute. Rukawa-Kaed stopped Momotaro and said cautiously, whether the water the other party sent is unsafe, I think it's better to check it first. Momotaro chuckled and patted Rukawa on the shoulder. It's right to be careful, but there's no need to be so nervous. It's not the shogunate era anymore, and poisoning is outdated. And the fat man's steps are unsteady, and he looks like an ordinary person. How could he think of poisoning? Besides, if he poisoned, he should have a nervous expression, or at least persuade us to drink water, but you see, he just threw the water away and didn't care. Obviously he didn't care whether we drank it or not. Finally, he concluded with certainty, he must hope that we will spend money to buy it after drinking it, so that he can make money. Oh. Rukawa is a martial arts master, but he still lacks some experience in human relations. While listening to Momotaro's analysis carefully, he kept nodding. Senior is right, I have learned again. These treacherous businessmen. You young people must learn more before you can take on the responsibility of protecting the royal family. Momotaro unscrewed the bottle cap, handed it to Rukawa, and took another bottle for himself. Gulp, 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 the two drank half a bottle of water in a few gulps. Then they lay down on the bed to rest. This time, they couldn't rest well. Rukawa-Kaed was lying on the bed, and for some reason, he thought of the scantily clad girl who had just knocked on the door. The shaking chest, the slightly fat waist, and the big buttocks wrapped tightly in a leather skirt, which outlined a round and full shape, kept appearing in his mind. The vulgar woman who he originally despised and didn't even want to look at, now made him feel hot in his lower abdomen. Damn, how could I be like this? Too depraved, Rukawa-Kaed despised himself deeply, and tried his best to drive the twisting body of the young woman out of his mind, but the more he did so, the more uncomfortable he felt. No, I absolutely cannot let Princess Keiko down, even mentally. Rukawa-Kaed sat up from the bed suddenly, gasping for breath. There was only one bed, and two ninjas slept at one end each. Rukawa sat up straight and immediately found that his senior Momotaro, who was opposite him, had a red face, as if on fire. "Senior, what's wrong with you? Why is your face so red?" Rukawa was shocked. Almost at the same time, Momotaro was also shocked and blurted out, "Why is your face so red?" Division. Happy National Day everyone, eat and drink well. If you are going to go on the highway, remember to bring an empty bottle with a larger mouth. Speaking of which, I was stuck on the viaduct last night. I searched the car and found only small-mouthed mineral water bottles worth 1.5 yuan. I couldn't fit them in at all when I got home. I almost burst. Tragedy. Hey, why are your faces so red? Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 744. The Horse King, the white paper fan of Sheng, is a kind of military advisor, and the right-hand man of Chuiji, the original boss of Causeway Bay. Due to the intervention of the leader Alok, the power transfer between Chuiji and Jixiang was relatively smooth. Jixiang has a set of means to win people's hearts. In order to prevent people from being cold after leaving, he still retains the position of the Horse King in the hall. Just now, the Horse King asked Jiangbao, "Have you forgotten my nickname?" As for the Horse King, no matter how fierce the horse is, it can be tamed in my hands. This is not a joke. Since the Horse King changed his career to open a horse stable and became prosperous in the love industry, many people have indeed forgotten the original origin of the nickname Horse King, and thought it was because he opened several horse stables. In fact, the original occupation of the Horse King was a horse trainer who was responsible for breeding stallions. No matter how chaste the mares are, or how unruly the stallions are, they have to be obedient in his hands, have sex a few times, and have a breeding. The reason is that his little medicine bottle, a craft passed down from his ancestors, is a strong drug. There is a saying about this thing. Horses usually mate from behind, so this medicine is called horse after cannon. I choose. The other people were dumbfounded. Deizai said exaggeratedly, "It's for horses. After people drink it, won't even gods and immortals be unable to control themselves? Not only can they not control themselves, they will drill holes wherever there are holes, and grind iron pestles into needles. Even horses need to do it 3 or 4 times to get satisfied. For people, they can't stop until they are dry and sticks break." Ha ha ha, the Horse King laughed proudly. Several people were laughing, and Jixiang's direct subordinate suddenly said, "No, Brother Jixiang ordered that a living person be taken. With such a strong drug, the two of them will not cause any trouble." Ma Wang slammed the table and stood up, his face suddenly changed, and he shouted at the door, "Go up and catch them, separate them first." The hotel door was pushed open, and the corridor outside was full of people. More than a dozen people filed in, followed by Deizai and Jiangbao, who were the best fighters, rushed to the second floor. Jiangbao didn't think about it and kicked the door of the room open with a bang. In the room, the big bed was a mess. The clothes of the two men had been torn into pieces. They were hugging each other and stroking each other up and down crazily. The older one even stretched out his tongue and was about to lick the other person. Deizai was so disgusted that he almost vomited. "Knock him out and take him away." Jiangbao was also a standard straight man. Seeing this situation, he felt a chill and waved to his brothers. It happened so fast that before the younger brother could rush into the room, there were suddenly several whizzing sounds in the air, and several darts flew towards them. Momotaro and Rukawa-Kaed felt the threat even though they were in a daze, and they made instinctive movements. Unfortunately, the power of the hindsight gunpowder was too strong, and the two guys concentrated almost all their strength on one part. Their hands were soft and their vision was blurred. They could not exert any of their usual kung fu, and their strength and accuracy were far below the standard. In their current posture, it was rare for the two of them to be able to throw darts. With a few muffled bangs, the darts all hit the wooden wall, causing a lot of wood chips to fly. Pick. What the hell? The younger brothers who just rushed in were all startled. Momotaro and Rukawaka-ed are indeed the top ninjas trained by the Japanese royal family. Just now, there were only two of them in the room, and the atmosphere was relatively safe and closed. They were dizzy from the drug, but now a large group of people suddenly appeared. Under the intense stimulation, they barely regained a little sobriety. Go, Momotaro shouted, a white light flashed, and with a bare black hairy butt, he broke through the window and jumped down from the third floor. Rukawaka-ed didn't even fully realize what was going on. He subconsciously followed the footsteps of his predecessors and instinctively obeyed the orders of his superiors. He slapped the bed with both hands and jumped up like a spring. A standard fish jump into the water, followed by a jump out of the window. Jiangbeo, Daizai, and a group of young and dangerous guys were dumbfounded. Are these two still human? This is a 3-story building, and they jumped down without thinking? Immediately afterwards, 2 heavy objects fell to the ground outside the window. Momotaro and Rukawaka-ed got out of the window one after the other. There was a large light box more than 1 meter long outside the second floor, which just blocked their fall. The 2 people hit the light box hard, knocking the iron frame supporting the light box crooked, and then fell one after another in a small alley behind the hotel. Severe pain can bring sobriety. The 2 people fell dizzy, and the cold wind blew them awake. Senior, what happened? Rukawaka-ed vaguely remembered some fragments in the room just now, and his little face suddenly turned bitter, and he asked with a look of horror. Before Momotaro spoke, dense footsteps sounded on both sides of the alley. A large group of gangsters holding steel pipes and machetes rushed into the alley from both ends. Momotaro and Rukawaka-ed subconsciously reached for the dart bag. They jumped down naked, and the only cover on their bodies was a torn loincloth and a hairy dart bag. Wow, so pleasing to the eyes, so exciting. The leader, Ma Wang, held up his phone and took several photos of the 2 men, then his face darkened. Brothers, help me beat these 2 bastards. Don't beat them to death, brother Jixiang must live, said Jiangbeo on the other side. Poor 2 dignified Japanese royal ninjas, top-ranked ninjas of the Koga school, masters who were many times stronger than Sakata-kun whom Su Ming met at the beginning, were beaten up by a group of Hong Kong hooligans at this time. The 2 ninjas were still under the influence of drugs, their hands and feet were weak, they were injured, and they had no weapons. They were stuck in a narrow alley and could not use their martial arts. They heard a muffled sound of close contact between sticks and flesh. Soon, the 2 ninjas were beaten like pigs, just as the saying goes, even his mother didn't recognize him. Eddie Peng, I'll let you Eddie Peng, the fat boss of the Regent Hotel beat him particularly vigorously. While picking his nose, he said viciously, when Uncle was young, people gave him a nickname, Bruce Lee of Causeway Bay. Ada. With a strange cry, he raised his foot and kicked over. 2 naked ninjas were tied up and put in sacks and sent to the Jixiang seafood food stall. Mr. Su, are these 2, huh? Jixiang didn't say a word, and fiercely gave Jiangbeo a middle finger. You bastards, who asked you to hit me in the face? How can I recognize you when you are beaten like this? It was really hard to identify them. Su Ming looked at them closely for a long time before he barely confirmed that they were these 2 guys. Boy, I have no grudge against you, why did you poke my butt with a dart? Su Ming pointed at Eddie Peng whose face was swollen bigger than Zhengxi and asked. On the way here, Rukawaka-ed and Momotaro had completely recalled what happened in the hotel. The 2 were so ashamed and angry that they just closed their eyes and waited for death, gritting their teeth and refusing to say a word. Mr. Su, I have seen many stubborn people. Why don't you leave it to me? I guarantee that they will speak within half a day, Ma Wang said with a smile on his side. He Baoan frowned and looked at Su Ming. Brother Jixiang, thank you so much this time. In my opinion, it would be better to hand these two people over to the police. Madam is here, so we can take them back to the police station to record their statements, so that you won't get into trouble, Su Ming said. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 745. He Baoan called for a police car. Su Ming and He Baoan got on the police car together. Accompanied by the police team members of the same squad, they escorted the two ninjas back to the serious crime team. According to the regulations, if the suspect is injured, he has the right to request a white car. However, these two guys have been uncooperative since they were arrested. He Baoan was angry and simply ignored the process. Anyway, they didn't look too seriously injured. This is Su Ming's second prison sentence. Last time he came here to assist in the investigation, this time he is the victim. This is what Su Ming meant. Before he knows the origin of the other party, he hopes that the matter is within a controllable range. If the case is investigated with the charge of assaulting a police officer, attacking a senior police officer and destroying the police gun, the nature of the case is completely different. He Baoan was promoted 3 levels in a row. The office environment is similar to before. It is still the office on that floor, but it has moved from the large office outside to a small compartment on the side, and a sign of Senior Inspector is hung at the door. How did I offend you? Is it necessary to do this? Su Ming was speechless to the two suspects. At first, he hated them, but along the way, the expressions on their faces were as if they had suffered a great humiliation, and they were so sad and angry that people couldn't help but feel sympathy. Su Ming really couldn't figure out what he had done that was so infuriating. Killed their father? Robbing their wives? The two people twitched their mouths twice and closed their eyes without saying a word. According to the procedure, He Baoan went to interrogate the two suspects, and Su Ming recorded his confession alone in another office. Hello, Mr. Su, do you remember me? The person who came to record Su Ming's confession was a petite young female police officer. She greeted him sweetly as soon as she entered the door holding a large paper box. It didn't look like a police officer recording a confession, but like meeting a friend. Su Ming still remembered her, and said with a smile, "Yeah, of course I remember, you made me coffee last time. You got promoted too." Abby looked down at her epaulets, nodded vigorously, opened her eyes and said seriously, "Yeah, I have to thank you for solving such a big case. Our whole team has been commended." After that, she took out a milk tea and a bag of fried chicken from the paper box like a magic trick. It will probably take a long time to record the statement, "I bought fast food specifically for you to eat." Haha, this is not good. After all, it's a police station. Su Ming also laughed. He likes to deal with this kind of girls, maybe not very beautiful, but gives people a very relaxed feeling. It doesn't matter, anyway, I'm hungry too. She took out a milk tea and a few egg tarts from the small box, spread a lot of food on the table, and said with a smile, "Su Sheng, you won't complain about me, right?" "Maybe," Su Ming said seriously, "if it doesn't taste good, I will definitely complain about you." Abby pretended to be scared and stuck out her tongue. The confession went very smoothly. The two of them chatted like they were talking. While eating, Abby recorded Su Ming's confession. Sometimes when her hands were greasy, she would suck them in her mouth, wipe them with a napkin, and quickly record a few words. Su Ming's side was very smooth, but He Baoan's side had some problems. It was found that the identities of these two people were very unusual. They were security guards of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of the Japanese royal family and senior ninjas who were responsible for the safety of royal family members. Originally, these two ninjas would rather die than confess. If they were placed in ancient times, they would definitely commit suicide the moment they were caught. After all, the times are different. Modern ninjas may not be inferior to ninjas in martial arts in the feudal period, but in spirit, they are inevitably influenced by civilized society. It is difficult for the kind of dead warriors who die for the head of the family for an idea or a word to appear, and still try to survive. Momotaro and Rukawa-Kaed still want to live unless they have no other choice. And the police's defense measures are too good, they have no chance. In addition, the effect of the drug had just worn off, and his hands and feet were weak, and the desire to die was not so strong in his heart, so he neither committed suicide nor cooperated with the police. The police have their own way of doing things. If you want to break through the psychological defense of the suspect, get a confession, and capture the suspicious points and loopholes in the other party's words, it is a science. Hibaoan is a top student in the police academy and has a way. After experiencing the absurd incident at the Lijiang Hotel, the two ninjas were in a state of confusion, and the younger Rukawa-Kaed finally blurted out some useful information. Japanese, ninja, adding several sensitive information together, Hibaoan immediately realized that this was by no means a simple case, and the temperament of these two people was not ordinary. With a woman's intuition, she even thought of Princess Keiko at the first time. She saw clearly the love and hate between the princesses and Su Ming in the horse farm that day. If Princess Keiko is really involved, it will be a major issue in the diplomatic relations between the two countries. How to deal with it is no longer something that Senior Inspector Ho Bo-man can decide. It doesn't even have much to do with the person involved, Su Ming. In the face of national interests, all individuals must give in. Ho Bo-man couldn't even go to Princess Keiko to verify, but had to report directly to his superiors. Soon, a director of the Hong Kong police came to the police station to take over the case. The senior police naturally had their own information channels and confirmed Ho Bo-man's guess: these two people are the leaders of the Koga faction ninja who are loyal to the Japanese royal guards and the royal family. The police department took over the whole thing. With the authority of Su Ming and Hibaoan, they can only know so much. As for how the two countries will negotiate and compete in the future, and how to deal with these two people in the end, that is not their concern. In addition, Su Ming finally understood why the two ninjas wanted to trouble him. The child had no mother, it was a long story, and the car he smashed belonged to Princess Unity, which led to the subsequent bet. Princess Jiaza seemed to be "I'm venting my anger on you, Nikan. Mr. Su, you are really not an ordinary person. I really underestimated you before. I just came to Xiangjiang for a trip and let the princesses of the East and the West fight for you." At the end of the trip to Xiangjiang, Hibaoan sent Su Ming to the airport. When he was at the boarding gate, he had a strange expression and a sour tone. "What do you mean by fighting for me? It's obvious that the two princesses joined forces to beat me." "Okay." Su Ming pointed to his butt and said with a grimace, "My buttocks are all spread open." Hibaoan couldn't help but smile when he thought of everything the two of them had experienced in the alley, and then sighed faintly. "You are already a billionaire, a well-known figure in society. You should be more careful when doing things. You have to know how to take care of yourself." The words were kind, but the tone made Su Ming shudder. This was not the tone that friends should have when talking to each other, it was just like a couple saying goodbye. "Hurry back to the mainland and stay there, who knows what accident will happen. I have kept my virginity as pure as a jade along the way, and I have not opened up a harem despite all the temptations. Don't let your chastity get ruined when you reach 2 million words." Dividing line. By the way, there was a book about using wild honey soaked in vinegar to treat acne. Many book friends asked if it was true. This is a folk remedy. Everyone has different constitutions and different causes of disease. Of course, it cannot be generalized. All in all, it's just written in the novel, don't mess around with it in reality, it will be done with plastic surgery and disfigurement. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 746. After returning to Yangchuan City, Su Ming did three things immediately. The money won from the horse farm was exchanged for 140 million Chinese yuan, of which 40 million was re-entered into various companies. In order to invest in filming, the companies almost drained their working capital. With this money, plus the company's regular returns, the heads of Daowon companies finally breathed a sigh of relief. The employees may not feel that the companies seem to be running normally, but the ones who are really in charge are so nervous. Su Ming gambled and drained the company's cash flow. If there is any trouble, the company really can't come up with money to deal with it. In just a dozen days, the heads of several companies are walking on thin ice, with their hearts all devoted to the company, staring at it closely, fearing that something will go wrong. Shen Yan from the Ministry of Science and Technology simply moved to the company to live. It is said that no one is doing real economy now. Well, we have worked hard for a year, so it is better for you to go to Hong Kong and gamble. Wang Hao and Su Ming joked privately. The real economy has indeed been in a downturn in the past 2 years. A medium-sized company with 1,000 employees may not be as cost-effective as hoarding a few houses in first-tier cities after working hard for a few years. Driven by this abnormal profit, many entrepreneurs no longer have the mind and courage to inject capital into enterprises. Instead of spending money on R/U0026D management, it is better to speculate in real estate. However, Su Ming himself knows very well that the money-making incident of the Hong Kong Jockey Club this time is probably the last time and cannot be replicated. The failure of the real economy does not mean that it will definitely not make money. After all, Su Ming is not in the manufacturing industry. As long as he works hard in the various industries under his name, the profit is still sufficient. He himself has also thought that in fact, money is really just a number when it reaches a certain scale. Now, there is almost no difference between 100 million and 10 million, or 1 billion, for him. He still has 3 meals a day and a bed. But in his lifetime, he wants to do something real. The remaining 100 million will be used partly to cope with the additional investment that may be needed for the next World of Warcraft movie, and partly as reserve funds. In addition, he originally planned to go to Romania to see his big castle, but after coming back, he felt a little tired. There was no need to be so nervous and fly around all day. Anyway, the big castle has stood in Romania for hundreds of years and will not fly away. It doesn't matter if these few days. He didn't tell anyone about the castle. He had already thought about it in his heart. This castle will be of great use in the future. The second thing is to visit the patients. Within the scope of the zoo, there are 2 seriously ill patients, Yang Tao's father Yang Lin, and Korean boy Park Cheol-bin. Yang Lin is old, not only physically injured, but also psychologically traumatized, and recovery is slow. Although Park Cheol-bin is young, his illness is too bad. Su Ming risked his life and secretly cut off some of his precious Tai Sui to heal them, but it seems that the effect is not as good as expected. After drinking Tai Sui wine with added ingredients for a period of time, Yang Lin's physical condition did not show any obvious improvement. He was still sitting in a wheelchair. According to the doctor, he recovered very well. It's just very good, not a miracle. However, his mental state is much stronger than at the beginning. It is said that when the old man is free, he lets the caregiver push his wheelchair to stroll in the mountains, and sometimes he recites a few positive poems. The travel agency has reopened, and the old man has almost become a scene in the mountains. In the morning light on the top of the mountain, under the moonlight at night, with golden clouds and clear springs, you can see the figure of an old man. Many tourists think that Yang Lin is a sage living in seclusion in the mountains. The road to the reserve was finally built, and the first batch of tourists came back with rave reviews. There are many wildlife parks and animal reserves in China, but there has never been a place like the Qinling Animal Reserve, which is almost 100% pristine. Other reserves are either too artificial and almost lose their natural colors, or they are pure and natural, but there are really not many animals. It is pristine and gathers a large number of animals. The Qinling Reserve is the first in the country. In terms of animal density and species, the Qinling Reserve even far exceeds the Yellowstone National Park in the United States. More importantly, this pure nature is not just a wild natural environment. Two pandas lead the animal army to build a city and a village in the mountains, which is like an animal fantasy world. What is the feature? This is the feature. There is a strong call for opening up the reserve to a larger area, but Su Ming insists on controlling the number of tourists and the frequency of entry, which has been unanimously recognized and praised by domestic animal experts. Similar to Yang Lin, Park Cheolbin's condition has not improved much. He eats medicinal food in different ways every day. I don't know whether it is the medicinal food that works or the tai sui meat added to it. I went to the hospital for a follow-up examination. The cells are still drying up, but the speed of drying up is a little slower. Again, the situation is good, but there is no miracle. Uncle Su, everyone will die, as long as you don't waste your time. Park Cheolbin actually looks lightly on the issue of life and death. During the time when Su Ming was away, he conducted in-depth research on several companies accompanied by Su Ming and even compiled an investigation report. I don't know how this kid can make such a thick stack of things when he can't even hold a pen. Silly boy, what does wasted time mean? How is it not wasted? There is no conclusion. Is it not wasted just by working hard, and is it wasted by admiring the sunrise and sunset? Su Ming rubbed the little guy's head with some distress. This smart kid is still just a kid after all. Even if he has to die in the end, Su Ming hopes that he can be relaxed and happy while he is alive. Pu Jibin blinked, but Uncle Su, I like the current situation very much. At least I am a little busy, which makes me feel that I am still alive. That's true too. Su Ming was stunned for a moment, then laughed. After seeing the patient, Su Ming began to deal with Ho Longtao's affairs. Organizing a movie theater. To be honest, when Su Ming was in Xiangjiang, he didn't take running a movie theater too seriously. But when he was helping Ho Longtao move that day, he saw Ho Longtao's mother-in-law to be, which made Su Ming make up his mind. They are really brothers who settle accounts. Ho Longtao's private cinema rents the house of Song Lulu's family. In the past, the rent was paid on a monthly basis. After getting together with Song Lulu confiscated the rent. However, the living expenses of the two of them every month came from the private cinema, allocated from the income. Song Lulu's mother, an old woman in her 50s, settled the accounts with Ho Longtao one by one in front of Su Ming. I said, Ziaha, when you were in love with Lulu, your aunt saw that you were in financial difficulty and didn't want your rent. Now that you have broken up, the situation is different. The accounts must be settled clearly. As I said before, it's not that aunt is greedy for money. Auntie is an innocent person, and she must do things clearly. It's not like Lulu didn't give you a chance. You didn't grasp it yourself, and it's okay that it delayed her youth. The rent must be paid. After 1 year, you owe. I paid 10 months rent. You probably don't know the current market situation. Landlords raise the rent once a month. I'm kind-hearted. It's not easy for you young people to start a business. So, I'll calculate the rent increase once every 3 months. The old woman chirped and calculated the accounts for a long time, and finally calculated a total of 48,000. Ho Longtao's hands were shaking with anger. Just as he was about to defend himself, Su Ming waved his hand impatiently and threw away 50,000 yuan. Monkey, why are you blabbing with this kind of person? Su Ming glared at Ho Longtao. I only made more than 2 million, but for tens of thousands of dollars, you are blabbering with this kind of person. Your mouth is dirty. Hey, how do you speak? Do you have a tutor? Ziyaha, where did you earn 2 million? What's going on? Ho Long Tao said expressionlessly, if there is no other account, I will leave first. The old woman's somewhat annoyed voice came from behind, I haven't seen anything in the world, so I thought having 1 or 2 million would be a big deal. A house in my house is only worth this money. Su Ming made up his mind, even if Ho Long Tao piles mud and throws money at it, he still has to make something magnificent for him. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 747. Is Ho Long Tao a pile of mud? In the eyes of Song Lulu and her family, Ho Long Tao is just a pile of dirt. He is in his 20s, has no business, and spends all day guarding a shabby private theater that makes little money. He can't even pay the rent. He is a typical good-for-nothing young man. In Su Ming's eyes, a person who could tell the number of a picture at a glance in college definitely had excellent qualities that ordinary people did not possess. When it comes to watching movies, Wang Hao, Lin Mu, Yang Tao, and myself don't have this ability. At least it shows that Ho Long Tao is willing to put effort into doing things. This statement was more or less a joke, and it was suspected of comforting Ho Long Tao. However, Su Ming feels that some people want ready-made fruits. If you put a lot of real estate certificates, company equity, and luxury cars in front of them, they will think that you are capable and motivated, but young people who have just graduated, how many people can rely on their own abilities to have this in a year and a half? It would be impossible without taking the wrong path and relying on the cute family. Struggle requires a process, and not all struggles will necessarily have good results. It was Ho Long Tao's bad luck to meet someone like Song Lulu and his daughter. He put his struggle in front of the other person's eyes and the other party turned a blind eye. In fact, there are number 100% great people in the world, and no one is 100% useless. The key is whether the person has found a position that suits him. Going a step further, it is also important whether you have met a noble person. This noble person may be someone who can support you financially, who can help you in your career, or who can support and encourage you spiritually. Even if you just accompany him silently, you can be considered a noble person. Obviously, Ho Long Tao had not met many noble people before, but Wang Hao joked that he had met a lot of bitches. Each flower catches his own eye, and Su Ming doesn't want to comment on the words of noble and inferior. What he observed was Ho Long Tao himself. His communication skills, market development capabilities, and management and R/U0026D capabilities are far inferior to those of Wang Hao, Yang Tao, and even Lin Mu. These are his shortcomings. But being able to insist on doing what you think is right and what you like, and persisting in it silently and unswervingly regardless of good times or bad times, is Ho Long Tao's strength. When employing people, you must maximize your strengths and avoid weaknesses. In the past, Ho Long Tao was responsible for all the internal and external business of the private cinema. The so-called proprietress Song Lulu was also a master who didn't know what to ask and didn't know what to eat. She spent the whole day holding a big bucket of popcorn. Opening a room to watch Korean dramas, it's a wonder that this business can do well. Su Ming's usual style was to either do nothing or do it well, and this time it was the same. He planned to buy a theater directly and assign a team to Ho Long Tao. Monkey, I give you two choices. Brothers have settled accounts. No matter how good the relationship is, since we are starting a business together, some things must be made clear before starting, and the provisions that should be implemented on paper must also be clear. Among so many classmates, Wang Hao is a special case. On the one hand, brothers and friends can also be divided into close friends and close friends. The nature of the relationship between Wang Hao and Su Ming is different from that of several other people. To use the words on the internet, they are the kind of people who understand me. The two have the same temperament, and many things are self-evident. On the other hand, Wang Hao's identity and background are different from others. Su Ming and Wang Hao are not exactly superiors and subordinates. First, as a professional manager, I hire you to manage the theater, and you will receive an annual salary, dividends, and maybe equity in the future. Second, you have a sum of money on hand that you can invest, and you will have a certain share of the theater at the beginning of its establishment. Shares, he is considered a partner, Su Ming said. Two options, each with its own pros and cons. Being a professional manager does not require investment. Ho Longtao can use the more than 2 million won from the jockey club to buy a house and a car. With the addition of his identity as a cinema manager, he can immediately transform into a so-called successful person in the eyes of ordinary people. And since there is no investment, economic interference can be minimized during the specific operation, and worries about gains and losses can be avoided. To invest as a shareholder, I am afraid that Ho Longtao will have to invest at least half of his more than 2 million yuan. He will have to live a hard life in a short period of time. No one dares to guarantee the scale of the theater in the future. With this investment, that may bring him huge rewards in the future, or it may be in vain. Su Ming thought that Ho Longtao would have to think about it for a while. After all, not everyone can invest more than half of their net worth without blinking an eye. Ho Longtao did not expect that. Ho Longtao said without hesitation, I will be a shareholder, and the money earned from the racecourse will be left behind for 3 people 100,000, I will invest the rest. Monkey, think about it, that's more than 2 million in real money. To put it bluntly, even if you don't do anything, you can still live pretty well with this money in the bank and earning interest. Su Ming laughed. Road. Ho Longtao thought for a while and said, in the matter of Song Lulu, I understand a truth. What is my due will definitely be mine in the end. What is not my due, no matter how careful I am, I still won't get it in the end. These 2 million are originally heaven. If it falls, Kui Baiga has a saying that is right, when one's fortune comes, one must grasp it. Ho Longtao said seriously, Old Su, you won't say it, but I know in my heart that you gave me my luck. Opening a movie theater is largely a support for me. If I still hold on to the 2 million pretending to be a grandson at this time. Okay, monkey, that's enough for this job. Su Ming nodded, let's go and talk about the acquisition together. When the theater started, there were initially 3 options, self-construction, leasing and direct acquisition. Building it yourself would take too much time and effort, and may cost more than purchasing it directly, and the effect may not be as good as purchasing a mature cinema. Renting a venue is cheap for a short period of time, but there are too many restrictions and it is not reassuring. Su Ming finally decided to buy a cinema. There are several conditions for buying a cinema. First, the scale should be moderate. Su Ming cannot afford to buy a cinema that is too big at once. For example, he wants to buy a large cinema chain like Wanda and Jackie Chan, but he does not have enough money. Even if he has enough money, he is only involved in cinema screenings at present, and his understanding of the industry is limited. He may not be able to play well even if he can buy it. Moreover, compared with the major cinema chains, Daowin's foundation is still relatively weak. If it enters the market with great fanfare at the beginning, it is easy to arouse the vigilance and suppression of the major cinema chains. Second, the acquired cinema must have a certain degree of popularity, so that he does not have to spend a lot of money on advertising. At least it must be a cinema that ordinary citizens in Yangchuan City know. Third, the background of the cinema should be simple, and it is best not to have too complicated entanglements in various aspects. Otherwise, even if it is bought, it will not be reassuring to operate. For this purpose, a special investigation was conducted. At present, there are 3 cinemas in Yangchuan City that meet these 3 conditions, among which Changhe Cinema is the most suitable. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 748. Old Yangchuan people are not unfamiliar with Changi Cinema. This is the first batch of cinemas in Yangchuan City. As early as more than 20 years ago, when there were only 3 cinemas in Yangchuan City, Changi Cinema was one of them. 2 large viewing rooms, an auditorium, and 4 small viewing rooms were simply the configuration of the super deluxe version at that time. If we only look at the scale, even among the dozens of cinemas in Yangchuan City today, there is a place. It is said that Changi Cinema once undertook various meetings and celebrations of the municipal government for a long time in the early 1990s. When mentioning Changi Cinema, the older generation will first think of Changi Color TV Factory, a long-established state-owned enterprise in Yangchuan City. Because Changi Cinema is a subordinate institution of Changi Color TV Factory, built as employee welfare and corporate image. In the early 1990s, when the national electrical industry was developing rapidly, Changi Color TV Factory followed the trend of the times and introduced 6 color TV production lines from abroad at one time. In just a few years, it became a nationally renowned color TV giant enterprise. It is precisely because of the almost irresponsible investment of Changi Color TV Factory that Changi Cinema was able to lead the market. As time passed, the domestic color TV market gradually became saturated, foreign brands poured into the country, and the drawbacks of rough development began to be exposed. Coupled with the rise of the internet, the younger generation's dependence on TV decreased. The Changi Color TV Factory was like a Wangxiao's New Year, and it was getting worse and worse every year. The giant factory that was once promoted as a national model went from bad to worse, and finally announced its bankruptcy in 2010. At the end of the asset liquidation, all the assets and book funds of Changi Company were not enough to cover the accounts. The only thing left was the Changi Cinema. Because the last few factory leaders were really unable to maintain the cinema and had no time to manage the side business, they simply contracted it out. After a few years, Changi Color TV completely disappeared in the long river of history. The former Changi Group only had such a cinema. Without the support of Changi TV, the business situation of Changi Cinema is not much better. The equipment is old, the staff is redundant, and the service competition awareness cannot keep up. It has become a marginal role in the cinema in Yangchuan City. Most of the people who go here to watch movies are residents living nearby, just for convenience and cheapness. Su Ming and Ho Longtao walked into the door from the cement steps at the entrance of the cinema. In the deserted hall, there were 2 rows of old brown sofas, with a few customers sitting here and there. Ho Longtao was about to call Mr. Wu of the cinema to tell him that he had arrived. Su Ming shook his head and said, "Let's have a cigarette first and sit for a while." Ho Longtao was stunned for a moment, but soon understood. If Mr. Wu came, he would definitely say good things, and his side might not be able to see the real situation of the cinema. The 2 lit a cigarette each on the sofa. There was a no smoking propaganda sign above their heads. The few uniformed staff in the hall seemed to have seen nothing, and no one came to care. The 2 young lovers probably bought tickets in a group and handed their phones to the ticket sellers, who were 2 older women in their 40s. They were talking about which daughter was in her 30s and still not married. They were talking with saliva flying and making disdainful sounds from time to time. Seeing the phone handed over, the 2 people actually didn't know how to operate it. One of them turned back and called to the control room, "Xiaojiang, come and see, there are group buy tickets." A young man in his 20s hurried out of the control room. He was not wearing work clothes and his hair was messy. He quickly entered the group by number on the ticket purchase screen, put down the phone and rushed back to the control room like a house on fire, and sat in front of the computer. Su Ming tilted his head and looked at it. It seemed that the computer screen was a picture of the Warcraft game, and they were playing a team dungeon. The young couple bought the tickets and turned to the side to buy popcorn and drinks. The popcorn salesperson looked to be in her 20s, a young girl in work clothes, with big curly blonde hair and a bunch of weird metal rings on her fingers, like someone playing death music. She was leaning against the glass shelf, looking down at her phone, and when she saw someone wanting to buy popcorn, she said without raising her head, "A large portion is 15 yuan, a medium portion is 12 yuan, and a small portion is 10 yuan. They are all packed on the side, take them yourself." "Do you have Coke?" the boy asked. The salesperson tapped the shelf with her fingers impatiently. "I can't see it, it's all here, 5 yuan a bottle." The boy's face darkened, and he wanted to say something, but the girl pulled him, so he didn't say much, and said to the girl, "Wait for me for a while," then turned and ran to the door. Not long after, he came back with 2 bottles of Coke, probably bought from the small supermarket next door. The 2 of them walked into the viewing channel with drinks. The person in charge of checking tickets didn't seem to look at the tickets. He took the tickets and tore off a piece of them. Without saying anything, he pointed at the dark channel and continued to press half of his body on the ticket checking counter in a daze. Ho Longtao was dumbfounded. The service of this theater was too perfunctory, right? "Go in and take a look," Su Ming smiled. It was not surprising. If the service equipment here was first class, how could it become his acquisition target? After buying the tickets, Ho Longtao habitually prepared to buy popcorn. Just as he picked up a box, he remembered that they were not really going to watch a movie, so why buy popcorn, so he put the box back. The salesperson who had been playing with his mobile phone was sharp-eyed and yelled at Ho Longtao, "Hey, hey, hey, what are you doing? You won't refund it." "I didn't buy it." Ho Longtao pointed at the popcorn box. "These boxes are all sealed, I just picked it up to have a look, it won't affect your secondary sales." "Then I don't care, you have to buy it if you take it." Ho Longtao was about to say something. Su Ming took out 50 yuan from his bag and handed it to him, without the time to talk to these people. The salesperson rolled his eyelids and looked at it, saying, "There is no change." "No need to change." Su Ming waved his hand impatiently and turned to walk into the viewing channel. "What are you pretending to be?" The female salesperson muttered behind him. On Saturday afternoon, the largest screening room was showing an imported film with a good reputation. The audience was sparse, about less than 20% of the seats. The seats and carpets were very old, and the ground was scattered with beverage bottles and melon seed shells left by the previous audience. It was estimated that no one would come to clean it up after the full-day screening. The only consolation was that the movie-watching effect was not bad. It could not be compared with the giant screen stereo surround sound, which was used to watch the big production that relied on special effects to attract attention. The effect was definitely a bit worse, but ordinary movies were still acceptable. After watching for more than 10 minutes, Su Ming and Ho Longtao left the viewing room and went around several other viewing rooms. They were all similar. The small theater that could be used as an auditorium was empty, and there was a layer of dust on the ground and the stage. The 2 of them wandered around backstage, and no one cared. "Okay, call Mr. Wu." Su Ming and Ho Longtao walked out and sat down on the sofa again, waiting for Mr. Wu to pick up. Su Ming lit a cigarette, but before he could take a puff, someone noticed it this time. The popcorn seller who was playing with his mobile phone just now pointed at Su Ming from a distance across the counter with a finger wearing a heavy metal ring, and said loudly, "What are you looking at?" "I'm talking about you. You can't read, don't you see that it says no smoking? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 749. The girl who bought popcorn pointed at Su Ming and said that she would not let him smoke. The noise attracted the attention of the 2 aunties who were selling tickets. They stopped chatting and said, "Hey, put out your cigarette." Didn't you see the sign that says no smoking? Please have some manners. While they were talking, the middle-aged ticket inspector came over and said impatiently with a frown, "If you want to smoke, go outside. This is a public place." Su Ming was really annoyed this time. No problem with smoking ban. If someone had stopped him and Ho Long Tao when they smoked for the first time just now, he would have never said anything. But just now, when the two of them finished smoking a cigarette, a group of staff in the hall acted as if they didn't see anything. Some played with their phones, some chatted about gossip. "Now your eyes are working? What did you do just now?" It was because of a quarrel when buying popcorn. Besides, even if smoking is banned, this attitude is not right. Let alone saying that customers are God and smiling service, even if you say it in a normal reminder tone, it is acceptable. "Mr. Wu, this way." Ho Long Tao suddenly stood up and waved to the theater, saying loudly. Everyone looked in the direction of Ho Long Tao's wave. A thin middle-aged man in a suit and a little bald walked down the circular steps on the second floor of the theater. He looked to be in his 50s. It was Wu Deshan, the president of Changi Cinema. "Mr. Su, Mr. Ho, sorry to have kept you waiting for so long." Wu Deshan walked downstairs quickly and greeted him with a warm face. When he came up to him, he had already handed him a hard zonghua. Su Ming glanced at the ticket inspector and the other three service staff standing by to dissuade him from smoking, raised his hand to block the cigarette, and said with a smile, "No smoking here, let's go to the office to talk." Wu Deshan was stunned, looked up at the no smoking sign, and thought that this sign has been hanging here for several years, and no one has taken it seriously. Customers and staff still smoke as usual. What happened today? After all, he is a businessman. Hearing Su Ming's tone was a bit cold, and looking at the ticket inspector standing by with an embarrassed face, he immediately understood the general situation. "Do what you need to do." Wu Deshan frowned, said to several employees a little annoyed, and then put on a smile, "Mr. Su, please go upstairs." Under the leadership of Wu Deshan, the waiters downstairs went back to their jobs. Those who were in a daze continued to be in a daze, those who were playing with their phones lowered their heads to play, and those who were gossiping continued to chat. However, after this, the topics they talked about were different from before. "Have you heard that Mr. Wu is going to sell the cinema? Do you think the two people just now are the bosses who came to buy the cinema?" "No way, how can there be such young bosses? It's hard to say. I tell you, one of them looked familiar to me just now. When I heard Mr. Wu call Mr. Su, I remembered that the owner of the city zoo is a young man named Su." The two middle-aged women talked to each other and really guessed Su Ming's origin. "Oh, that's not good. Maybe I just offended the future boss," an older sister exclaimed, but there was not much uneasiness in her tone, but more like a joke. "Xiao He, I'm talking about you. You just offended the future boss," an older sister said to the saleswoman who was playing with her phone. Little Zhao, with a head full of golden curly hair, didn't even raise his head, and said indifferently, "It's okay to offend him, what's the big deal? I'm afraid of him." The middle-aged man lying at the ticket gate in a daze has been a little nervous since Mr. Wu took Su Ming and Ho Long Tao away. He listened to the conversations of several other people with his ears perked up. At this time, he interrupted and said, "That's what you said, but after all, he is a leader, so you have to give him some face." "Tisk, I give him face." Xiao He snorted and continued to play with his phone. "Hey, Lao Shen, don't be a coward. Don't you usually regard yourself as Xiao He's big brother? Why, when you meet a rich person, you don't dare to be a hero to save the beauty?" The older sister at the ticket office made a somewhat harsh joke, and the two looked at the ticket inspector with some contempt in their eyes. The ticket inspector smiled awkwardly, as if to comfort himself, and muttered, "Hey, if I had known that he was a future leader, I wouldn't have said much just now." One of the ticket sellers said to Xiaohe, who was buying popcorn, "That's right, Xiaohe, your father was Mr. Wu's boss before, and he promoted Mr. Wu. I heard that Mr. Wu still comes to your father's house every Chinese New Year to wish him a Happy New Year. Is that true?" "How would I know that? I never care. Don't ask me." Xiaohe turned his head impatiently and continued to play with his phone towards the brighter light source. Having hit a soft and hard nail with Xiaohe, the ticket seller felt ignored and felt a little embarrassed, but she couldn't vent her anger on Xiaohe, so she looked up and said to another ticket seller, "Hey, Xiaohe is right, it's just a change of boss. We all came from the factory. Who doesn't have some connections in the factory?" A small cinema with too many people and no one to focus on work naturally gave rise to many conflicts. The serviceability of customers was not great, but there was a lot of office intrigue. Another ticket seller couldn't stand Xiaohe's indifference and flattery, so she said, "That's right, Sister Wang, if I remember correctly, the deputy director and your wife were classmates in junior high school." "Hey, the relationship is average. My wife didn't like him before, but she didn't know he could become the deputy director. But he really gave face to my family." The ticket seller smiled faintly. "Let me tell you, it's the same in my family. The former union president now calls me big sister when he sees me. He is so enthusiastic. So, these leaders are just like that. For example, our cinema is full of old employees and family members of the former head of the river. No matter who buys the cinema, they have to rely on us." She lowered her voice as she spoke. "To put it bluntly, even if the new boss is rich, as long as we stick together and don't work for him, won't we still be unable to make it in the end?" "That's right. We are all old colleagues. Of course, we can help our own people and turn our elbows outward." The downstairs people were gossiping about the so-called office politics, and the upstairs office was discussing business. Overall, the talks went smoothly, and the two sides quickly finalized the price, including all the equipment, venues, and all supporting facilities. In Su Ming's opinion, the total price was within an acceptable range. It was not cheap, but not expensive either. However, Ho Longtao was a little shocked. He didn't expect that it would cost so much to buy a cinema. With his little money, he could only buy a few % of the shares at most. The smooth negotiation was due not only to Su Ming's thorough preparation but also to Wu Deshen's attitude. Super Zoo. Author, Yan Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 750. Wu Deshen used to be the deputy director of the supply and marketing department in the factory. In the years before the Changhe factory closed down, he made a lot of money. Otherwise, he would not have the money to contract the cinema. Finally, he took advantage of the closure of the factory and bought it at a low price. Entered the cinema. But running a business and using the power of your position for personal gain are completely different things. Over the years, the situation of the cinema has gotten worse and worse. In the past 2 years, it has been unable to make ends meet every year. Not only did Wu Deshen not make any money, but he also spent a lot of money on it. He really didn't want to continue running this money-losing business. Now the cinema is still operating normally, and the debt is not too big. In a few years, it will really become a hole that cannot be filled. After there are no customers at all, it will be difficult to sell it, and there is no guarantee that anyone will want to give it away. "Mr. Su, I will go to your company with a lawyer to sign the contract this afternoon. We will do it as we just agreed." "What do you think?" Wu Deshen seemed to have let go of a heavy burden, with a smile on his face. The price he offered was higher than the theater's actual estimate. He was originally planning to have a heated exchange of words and bargaining with the other party, but he didn't expect that the other party agreed to it outright. Maybe it was because he was young and inexperienced, or maybe because he had a lot of money and didn't care about the 3 melons and 2 dates. Anyway, Wu Deshen felt that he had made money from this deal and it was a very good deal. Okay, Su Ming nodded and pondered for a few seconds. "However, there is one more thing I want to explain to you in advance. Wu Deshan frowned slightly. Everything was settled, what else is there? Putting it at the end was definitely not a good thing. Wu Deshan cheered up and said, Mr. Su, please tell me. Actually, it's not an explanation, but a clause. Su Ming tapped the table lightly with his fingers and said slowly, what I bought was the theater equipment and venue, not the employees. In other words, in short, I will not use all the previous employees. Please handle it yourself, Mr. Wu. Ah, Wu Deshan almost jumped up from behind the table, his eyes widened and he said in surprise, I don't want any of them. Mr. Su, are you telling me to fire all the current employees? Even Ho Longtao was surprised and looked at Su Ming unexpectedly. Yes, I don't want any of them. As for how to deal with it, whether to expel or severance, and how much compensation to give, that is your business, Mr. Wu. Su Ming paused, and then said, of course, I hope everything is legal. I didn't lower your price just now, I just reserved part of the severance expenses for you. Wu Deshan's face darkened, damn it, I know nothing is so cheap in the world. I said, why don't you lower the price? It turns out you are waiting for me here. Dismissal, is that something that can be done with just money? How many people have to be offended? Then it's not my concern. Su Ming said, Mr. Wu, I come with sincerity, but there are more than one theaters worth acquiring in Yangchuan City. You should be more clear about my Daowen group. If it doesn't work, I will add another one. With a little money, we can rebuild a cinema. But, this is too difficult to handle. Wu Deshan rubbed his hands in confusion. He glanced at Ho Longtao, hoping that Ho Longtao would help and say a few nice words. Ho Longtao pretended not to see Wu Deshan's eyes. Are you kidding? He is on Su Ming's side. Although I don't know why Su Ming didn't leave anyone behind, he must clearly support Su Ming at this time, otherwise he will become a rebel. How about I ask those people downstairs to come up and apologize to you? Wu Deshan thought it was the smoking ban that had made Su Ming unhappy, so he asked tentatively. Ho Longtao also thought so. The attitude of those people just now was really bad. Mr. Wu, you underestimate me. Su Ming waved his hand and said with a smile, I'm not going to argue with those people or do any tricks to settle accounts after the fall. To be arrogant, their level is not worthy of me. Get angry. That, Wu Deshan said doubtfully. Su Ming said calmly, businessmen, I don't want to use them in business because they are not qualified at all. To tell you the truth, I just walked around downstairs and saw everything inside and outside. 4 words, no matter how good the business experience is, it will not produce any good results in the hands of such people. Don't interrupt me. I also know that these people are old relationships. It's not easy to get rid of them, they have to offend people, and that's why I can't use them. Su Ming tapped his fingers gently on the table, old relationships, old friendships. They don't seem to cherish this relationship and favors. Instead, they have become old bastards and old bastards. They have become accustomed to this way of working. It is difficult to change. The original closure of Changhe factory had nothing to do with the fact that there were too many people like this. Mr. Wu, I don't want this situation to happen again in my company. Wu Deshan wanted to say something else, but Su Ming had already stood up, stretched out his hand to him, and said with a smile, Mr. Wu, these are my conditions, and the price will be as agreed just now. You think about it, whether it works or not, you've made a friend. Then you go ahead. Wu Deshan accompanied Su Ming Hao Longtao downstairs, and the two parties said goodbye at the entrance of the cinema. Wu Deshan frowned and went back to the office again, looking worried, thinking that these young people are too cruel now. Several employees in the lobby on the first floor looked at me, and I looked at you, and finally the ticket sales lady spoke up and said in a nonchalant manner, I'll just talk about it and it won't work out. Look at Lao Wu's mournful expression, he must be yellow. That's how much it costs to buy a movie theater. How can he have so much money if he only manages a zoo? He was probably scared back. Let's not worry about it, just get this salary safely, another person said. Speaking of wages, they haven't increased in several years. What can we do with this little money now? Lao Su, are you pushing him too hard? On the way back, Ho Long Tao was a little worried and said, it would be difficult to fire so many people at once, even if Wu Deshan is the boss. Of course it's difficult to do. It's not difficult to do. Why should I offer him such a high price? Su Ming said, but don't worry, it will definitely be done. Are you so sure? Why? Ho Long Tao was puzzled. Face is more important, favors more important, or money? Su Ming laughed. This is his private theater. Making money and losing money are all his. You said, after getting a large amount of money to get rid of the trap, and a group of people who are actually, how would he choose in front of his former colleagues who no longer have any interests? Don't worry, I am a capitalist. I understand him too well. There is no conflict of interest. Hello everyone, I can save face. In the face of enough profits, any relationship with old colleagues will not matter. No, Wu Deshan hates anyone who stops him from making money more than us. Now that we've laid off all of them, what will happen to them? If we start recruiting again, I'm afraid we won't be able to recruit as many experienced people at once, Ho Long Tao said. You forgot, what Cai Liming of the film company originally did was to deal with major theater chains. If he can't handle recruitment, no one else can. Su Ming patted Ho Long Tao on the shoulder. Monkey, don't think too much about other things. Cinemas won't be my main business for the time being, so you have to pay more attention and catch one thing for me in the future. You said it. Ho Long Tao nodded. Our cinema is different from ordinary commercial movies. We do not use blockbuster commercial movies as the standard for arranging and playing films. Art cinema? No way. Lao Su. Ho Long Tao was really surprised this time.